Hi and welcome to MAN301 Strategic Management, to week 10 of semester 1 2020, where we're going to be talking about organisational structure and control. Organisational structure and control. Today's objectives are as follows. On successful completion of this lecture and the associated activities, particularly the tutorial activities in which you're asked to identify examples of each of these theoretical constructs and bring those examples with you, we're going to define organisational structure and controls and discuss the difference between strategic and financial controls. And as part of that process, we are also going to talk about the balanced scorecard approach, which links strategic and financial controls in a broader balanced model. We're going to describe the relationship between strategy and structure. We are going to discuss the functional structures used to implement business level strategies and explain the use of three types of the multi-divisional structure to implement different diversification strategies. As part of that process, it's necessary to revisit some of our ideas of how firms grow from having a simple structure at the beginnings, through a functional structure, through a divisional structure, which includes multi-divisional and the three different forms we use in relation to our strategic focus on multi-divisional structures. And one of the reasons for spending some extra time on these areas and showing you some more organizational design type videos to support these concepts is to link our understanding of strategy and structure and control with the organizational culture, the organizational structure work you would have done in organizational behavior or introduction to management, those type of topics in your degree. So let's get started now with Objective 1. In Objective 1, we're going to define organizational structure and controls and discuss the differences between strategic and financial controls. And building on that, we're also going to look at an exercise on the balanced scorecard and some links in which I'm going to ask you to reflect on the balanced scorecard approach in an organisation you are familiar with. So that's a 5 or 10 minute activity at the end of this first section to help you embed these concepts as part of the lecture. So let's start with our definitions. Organisational structure specifies the firm's formal reporting relationships. Who reports to who? The procedures and policies and controls and authority in the decision-making process. You will remember that strategy is a set of decisions about policy and procedure and the allocation of resources. It's a set of decisions which require processes. So having a structure that aligns with your strategy will enable that set of decisions to occur in the most effective way. And how do we do that? We configure the firm so it aligns with our goals and objective. We set up policies and procedures that enable decisions to occur, actions to happen, resources to be allocated. We set up governance and control measures. We spent last week talking about the internal and the external governance mechanisms. This week we're going to talk about financial and strategic controls, but we're also, as I said, going to talk about the balanced scorecard method. And those things, when they align, enable us to add value, to have competitive advantage, and then ultimately sustainable competitive advantage leading to above average returns. So organisational structure is a critical component of effective strategy implementation processes. There is some debate in the literature about whether strategy follows structure or whether structure follows strategy. Part of that debate is if we look at a traditional way of organisations growing, as they grow, the structure will change, if they are successful, to match the strategy. So traditionally that's been how it's viewed. However, firms are often not born as small firms, or they're not born without some type of history. And sometimes strategy can follow structure because the structure of the organisation may be based on a series of agreements, past fights, historical events, cultural issues within the organisation, which may limit the way or help define the way that strategy is created and implemented. An effective strategy is one that provides stability to the firm so that it can successfully implement its strategies and maintain its competitive advantages. Stability comes from the capacity to consistently and predictably manage daily tasks, and to do that you must have a structure that has a line of authority that specifies who can make what decisions. However, as we've talked about before, in a competitive dynamic environment, we may need to have some flexibility in our strategy and therefore some flexibility in our structure so that we can explore the competitive possibilities and allocate resources effectively. So it's very rare for an organisational structure, particularly in the modern business environment, to stay static. And if we think about some of the examples we've used earlier in this course, for example, Wesfarmers' continuous change and evolution, and we've talked about its different levels of diversification and how it's moved from a holding to effectively a multi-divisional structure, a holding company conglomerate to a multi-divisional structure, or the level of diversification which aligns with its structure and strategy. When we look at the evolution of TPG and how it changed and evolved and grew and restructured, we can see that different needs produce different structures. And we've also talked about when we are developing a new product or an innovative product or developing a new area within our corporate strategy, that we may be effectively creating a new standalone business or a business that has synergies with other parts of the business as we have our different forms of corporate level strategy. For example, when the differences in the way that Virgin purchased Tiger and then ran them as two separate businesses without synergy, or the way that Jetstar purchased QantasLink and integrated it, added Jetstar and had linkages but kept it as a separate business that operated in concert with the organisation. Different different structures, different strategies. So strategy and structure, and there's a video to watch after this first objective, when we finish this first objective, that looks at whether strategy follows structure or structure follows strategy. So strategy and structure are linked together. The second area that I want to talk about in our definitions and our introduction, as I mentioned, are the issues of organisational controls. All of you have done an accounting topic. Many of you have done a marketing topic. Some of you have done a finance topic. All those topics, all those units, focus on financial controls. In addition, you have looked at Organisational controls in Introduction to Management, the introductory management topics, the organisational behaviour topics. Effectively, there are 3 types of controls. But for ease and simplicity, we often group strategic control and organisational control together. So, organisational controls guide the use of strategy and indicate how to compare actual results with expected results, and therefore suggest corrective actions to be taken when the difference is unacceptable. You notice that those things there have that broader definition has concerns beyond just financial. It's about how it affects the overall performance of the organisation, or indeed the performance of particular functions in the organisation. Strategic controls are examining the fit the firm has now with what it's doing now and what it can do in the future, and it can be used to judge the degree in which a firm focuses on the things that it's required to do to implement its strategy. It is sometimes easier to measure easy things. So sometimes control measures the easy things to be measured, not the important things that need to be measured. And this is particularly important, particularly evident when you have strategic competencies, core competencies that are difficult to identify their cause, identify the causes of. So if you have core competencies where you're not quite sure about what combination of resources and capabilities are leading to that core competency, but you know there's rareness and value and lack of imitability and hard to substitute, but you're not sure about how you actually get the core competency that produces those results, it's sometimes very difficult to measure and control what is giving you those results. Similarly, it's easy sometimes to do just a financial measure, a control measure about the number of staff or the throughput. Financial controls are an objective criteria used to measure the performance against some type of quantitative standard. Return of investment, market value, economic value added, return on assets. All those things are organisational controls that are financial controls. So let me go back to this overview again. There is something called an organisational control. This concept of organisational control. Frequently, the words organisational control and strategic control are used to mean the same thing, but also frequently the easier things to measure, like financial measures, are what are used to measure performance. When we're thinking about organisational control, therefore, we need to take a bigger picture and decide what is important, what contributes to our core competencies, and how do the things that contribute to our core competency help us add value? And we can add value through differentiation, through cost reduction. And then also, what accounting measures should we be using to measure our performance against our goals, which can be financial goals, can be cost reduction goals in a cost-focused area, can be a mix of other things, but they tend to be quantitative only and not necessarily catch the whole nature of the organisation. So they are the core ways that we look at organisational control, strategic and financial. Now, I know that you will find in other textbooks, in other courses, some other way of dividing these things up. You may have heard in accounting of triple bottom line accounting, which is measuring the impact on particular actions of the organisation against goals that reflect the goals of a variety of stakeholders. It's a very common method that broadens away from just evaluating the organisation in terms of financial contribution, cost reduction, delivery timelines. There is another model that is very widely used, and one of the reasons it's very widely used is because it's a simple model to explain And it can be adapted in many different contexts, large business, small business, different national contexts, different types of industry. And it's called the balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard focuses in its control function, and therefore in the way the firm is managed, on 4 areas: financial controls, customer and stakeholder interactions, internal processes, and the ability of the organisation to learn and grow. Improvement in your internal capability lead to better internal processes, lead to an improvement of customer and stakeholder satisfaction, lead to improved financial results. In the balanced scorecard, there are models of the balanced scorecard that are highly quantitative: financial measures, customer process measures, number of patents produced in learning and growth, ISO 9000, ISO 14000 rather, to measure internal processes. So there's ways to do that in a very quantitative way, but there's also ways to do that in a very qualitative way. So after I finish this particular slide, I'd like you to do 3 things, 2 of which are videos, and 1 of which is going to this website on the balanced scorecard, looking at those 4 perspectives, and then reflecting on an organisation that you're familiar with, and identify whether you think it has financial measures and customer stakeholder measures and internal processes and organisational capacity and learning or growth measures. So just reflect on what might be, if you know they've got them, reflect on what they are. If they don't have them, have a little think about what they could be. So 2 videos and a 10 to 15 minute exercise reflecting on the balanced scorecard. And after that, we will come back and look at objective 2, which is the relationship between strategy and structure.